right. Hi, Matthew. You want to take it away?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jen. Well, welcome everybody. Appreciate everybody's attendance here. We're going to keep this relatively short, as usual with these presentations. We're going to keep it to a half hour. What I'm going to do today is, for the first 20 minutes or so, I'm going to review this whole set of new incentives that have come out from the federal government over the past year, and which are going to be available for energy efficiency, kind of rolling out over the course of the next year. As I go through these, what you're going to see is that some of them are pretty definitive. Some of them, there's some areas that are yet to be defined. There are some rulemakings that are still going to have to come out of the IRS, Department of Treasury, and so on. But this is going to give you an excellent review of the kinds of incentives that are going to be coming out of the federal government, in some cases coming through states. So I'm going to be throwing a fair number of kind of numbers at you, and I'm going to be more than happy to send out this presentation afterwards so that you've got a chance to kind of review these. There will be no quiz at the end, so that's a good thing, I suppose. I think, I'm going to assume everybody, because you're already participating in this, that you already know who National Energy Improvement Fund is. So I'm going to skip my kind of usual introduction there, except to really emphasize that when we founded NEIF, and I am one of two co-chairs and founders along with Peter Kreisa, also Laura Nelson, when we founded NEIF, we really founded it on the idea that we were going to focus on energy efficiency, which we obviously do, but that we were also going to really try to focus on bringing private capital and public capital together in ways that were really going to make energy efficiency more affordable for customers, and for contractors, that it would really make energy efficiency a lot easier to sell. We try to do that in a whole variety of different ways, providing you with tools, providing you with information, obviously providing you with really good financing. So that's kind of what this is all about. What I'm going to do today is run you through just some of the detail, kind of the emerging opportunities, the details on that, and then a little tiny bit on how we're going to support you and how we can support you going forward. So I'm just going to jump right in here. One of the things, first of all, you're going to hear me talk very generally about a couple of acts, and I'm actually not going to really try to distinguish which incentives come out of which of the acts, but you've got there the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, or IIJA, and the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA. I'm not, as I say, really going to distinguish between those as I'm going through. Between those two, there are a whole bunch of different types of incentives. There's a lot of tax incentives, which I'm going to spend some time on, for both commercial and residential energy efficiency markets. There are grants, there are rebates, and then there's a set of financing incentives. So that's kind of the broad picture. So first of all, focusing and thinking about tax incentives. Then these are really divided between commercial, and there's really one type of incentive here, and also residential. And there's two. There's kind of electrification incentives, and then there's an expansion of the energy efficiency incentives. So not all of these are going to apply to every one of you. So those of you who are only focused on residential, you can you'll find this interesting, but maybe not as applicable. The same for those of you who are just focused on commercial. The residential may be less important. But I'm going to spend a minute talking about commercial, and commercial incentive. The tax incentive that really is most important here is getting a pretty dramatic increase. It's called the 179D. It's been around actually since the year 2006, so it's been around for quite a while. It was set up as kind of it had an expiration date in 2020. A couple of years ago, it was made permanent. It's always been available to commercial buildings, multifamily buildings, and actually, this is the interesting thing about it, also to designers of government buildings. What the new laws have done is that they have expanded it so that the incentive is also available to designers of not-for-profit buildings, schools, universities, churches, and real estate investment trusts. So But it gets interesting when you start looking at the numbers, because the numbers have increased significantly. And if you kind of look at the bottom of this slide here, the prior cap here was a tax incentive of $1.80 per square foot, right? So what that meant is that that was not insignificant. But if you start to look at the numbers here, the bottom line here is it would be possible to have an incentive of up to $5 per square foot, right? So this is not quite a tripling of this total incentive for energy efficiency. So again, for the types of buildings that we're talking about here, it basically says that you can get an incentive for a retrofit of a building, and this is looking at the full energy use in that building, of when it increases the energy efficiency of that building by 25% or greater. And then there is a even greater energy efficiency, or a greater incentive for retrofits that result in a 50% or greater incentive, right? So that's 50 cents per square foot versus $1 per square foot energy savings or incentive. So the interesting thing here, and this is, I'm curious to see how this works out, but they have also, the federal government also included what they're calling a bonus deduction. That is how you get to these much higher numbers. And the bonus deduction, it still makes that breakout between reaching a 25% total in energy savings and a 50% total energy savings, but it actually adds in a couple of things that are not specifically energy related. And one is meeting local prevailing wage requirements. And the second thing is apprenticeship requirements. So what that means, it's a little, when I said at the beginning, there's some areas that are still to be determined. There has not been a specific definition yet of what these kind of apprenticeship requirements would mean. So, but you can see, assuming that it's possible to have these, to take advantage of that, it's a very substantial incentive. The other piece, there used to be a lifetime cap on that building, so that once you made the improvements, that was all you could take. Now it's a 3-year cap. So every 3 years you could basically do a retrofit, additional retrofit. We'll see how this all kind of pans out. Just to give you an example though, and there's some maximums, a $50,000 square foot, 50,000 square foot, building, could have an incentive of up to $250,000, right? In the previous iteration of this 179D, that was capped at the 90,000, right? And there's a few things, a couple things that are important. One, not surprisingly, the size of the deduction can't exceed the cost of the energy efficiency improvement. And third, and this is I think really going to mean that this is really going to be focused on larger buildings, larger retrofits. You do have to have a third-party engineer do an energy model and produce a report on that specific building. So there are some requirements. So that's the big kind of commercial energy efficiency incentive. Let's talk for a minute about the tax incentives on the residential side. So this one also, there's some pretty significant incentive increases here, and this is available to any taxpayer. So that prior credit used to have a $500 lifetime limit. So I experienced this myself, where I was, we put in, I think it was we insulated the home. We took our $500 incentive, and the next year I thought, oh, I'm going to do some more, and then guess what? I couldn't get my incentive. So what this does is this actually removes that lifetime limit, and it changes it to a $1,200 annual limit, right? There's a limit of $600 for any one item, right? And then that credit rate, the tax credit rate, actually increases to 30% from 10% before, right? So $1,000 investment, now you could get, you could have $300 as opposed to $100 in that credit. So that at the high level, that's a pretty significant kind of incentive. The types of measures, pretty similar, or pretty much standard. This is kind of what you'd see. You will see a big emphasis in general on electrification as we start to move through some of these things. So heat pumps, for instance, have a maximum individual incentive of $2,000, right? So that just there's a definite electrification emphasis here. So if you kind of run through what an example would look like for a homeowner, a $4,000 improvement, 30% of that is what's deductible. That's your $1,200 limit right there. And you can do this for principal homes, second homes, vacation homes. So there's a fair amount of flexibility in that way. Third thing here is, or the second big category, I guess, is rebates. So rebates are a little bit different. First of all, they're really focused on low and moderate income. And this is this 80 to 150%, well, up to 150% of area-wide median income. Now, that 150% is it's really going to vary from one part of the country to another. So you could have, I don't have numbers off the top of my head, but you could easily have a household with 4 people earning $100,000 that would qualify for these incentives. So the other big thing about these is these are actually being administered by the states, so by the state energy offices. So there's $4.275 billion which is being sent out to states to administer or to for these grant and rebate programs. And then the law has put into effect a number of maximums here. And then a lot of this is going to be really determined via a set of rulemakings that the states are going to end up putting out, RFPs the states are going to end up putting out. So my guess is that we don't actually see these really coming into effect until probably maybe second, third quarter of next year. I might be wrong on that, but it's, there's some setup time that's going to be required. But if you look here, these are some pretty substantial numbers. And again, these are direct grants and rebates to low moderate income homeowners. There are caps per measure for people in that 80 to 150% of area-wide median income. And for those who are below that, it's actually just you've got a straight cap of $14,000. So that's a big number. So it remains to be seen how these are specifically administered. There will be variation state by state. But again, these are significant numbers here. So last thing that I want to focus on is the financing element of this. So IIJA, that's the Infrastructure Act, set out a revolving loan program. They provided revolving loan fund capital. Again, this is administered by and through the states, and the state energy offices. The way that this is being set up is that 60% of these funds are going to be sent to some 21 what they call priority states. And what that means is that there will be there's about 29 states that are getting 800,000 to a couple of $1 million, not much. And there's about 21 states, which are the so-called priority states, that are getting anywhere from typically $4 to usually $15 million, right? So if this is going to be important to understand which states you're really focused on. So most of the states, there's North and South Dakota, New Mexico is one of those states, but a lot of those states are generally concentrated in the kind of Midwest to Southeast region, with a few of them in the Northeast. So the states have a fair amount of flexibility. They can do commercial upgrades, support commercial upgrades. They can support residential upgrades. They can, again, support your kind of typical energy efficiency kinds of upgrades, HVAC, lighting, refrigeration. There is some kind of energy assessment that will be required. To give you another example of something yet to be determined, the specific energy assessment requirement that is going to be set out for the commercial retrofits is yet to be determined. Really important though, because $250 million spread across a bunch of states is it's a decent amount of money. I don't get as excited about $250 million spread across a bunch of states as I would be about, say, $1 billion spread out around a bunch of states. And here's the good news. it is possible to take this money and leverage it. In other words, combine this money with private sector money, which, guess what? That's something that a lot of us at NEIF have spent quite a bit of time doing, and we know this is something that we will be really focusing on, is bringing that private capital, finding ways to combine that private capital with this public capital. So in that way, we're going to get leverage, I think, of reaching $1 billion to even $1.5 billion from this 250, kind of a rough math there. Funds from this, again, are going to become available next year. And because this is going to be administered by the states, we are working with and talking to a fair number of states about ways that we can provide that support to the states to actually do what we do best, which is to originate and service energy efficiency loans and provide this combination of private and public capital. So last thing is, you can use us. How can we work with you? One is, there's a lot here. I've just run you through a whole bunch of numbers in just short of 20 minutes. Like I said, there is no quiz here, and we will be happy to send this out afterwards. Some of this is still evolving, but please feel free to use us as a resource. One of the things, it's not really just understanding the numbers, but we can also help you to understand how to better increase your sales by using these numbers, these incentives. In some ways, I mean, we all have seen increases in costs over the last 12 to 24 months. This will offset that to some degree, right? So, and we can really help you to understand how these incentives are going to work. We can help you to understand how to incorporate these incentives along with financing into your own sales pitch. And then you should look for a set of financing offers that we will begin to offer that will start to incorporate the benefits of the revolving loan fund and other incentives. So this is definitely an evolving kind of thing. We will keep you tuned. I expect that in the next 6 to 12 months, we'll probably do another webinar where most of the numbers won't have changed, but I think some of the specific ways to access these funds are going to become a lot more concrete. So we look forward to offering that for you. So there we go. There's my picture, and look forward to, if anybody has any questions, happy to answer. And this is kind of an exciting kind of new frontier in all of this. So happy to respond to questions if anybody wants to stay on.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, please put them in the Q&A section, and we'll hang on for a little bit and see if we have any.
I think the main thing to keep in mind is just, this is very much a stay tuned kind of thing. We're going to see some of this evolving rather quickly as the new year starts. One thing I did not talk about, because it is still very much to be determined, there is about $27 billion with a B dollars, which has been set aside for federal support of green banks. Green banks are they are not banks, but they are kind of organized institutional support organizations that will support financing for energy efficiency, renewable energy, electrification, that kind of thing. Those, I didn't cover that because frankly, it's still, there's a lot to be determined there about what that is going to look like, and it will vary from one state to another, from one region to another.
Nice. Thank you, Matthew. We have a few questions here. Can you explain more about your financing?
We offer financing for consumers, in other words, residential homeowners who are looking to improve the efficiency of their homes. That might be installing a heat pump. It might be installing some other type of more efficient heating, air conditioning system. We also offer financing for commercial customers, and so those could be customers who are doing a large or even small lighting retrofit, refrigeration, that kind of thing. The kind of financing that we offer is very focused on energy efficiency. One of the big things that we really focus a lot on is the idea that from a contractor perspective, there are no dealer fees in what we do. In other words, what the rate that you see is the rate that you get. We try to be very transparent for contractors, for customers. The other piece about what we do is that very often, and this is what I'm describing here, we understand how to work with programs. We understand how to work with, it could be utility programs, for instance, where we may be able to offer 0% because of our engagement with utilities. So we also, I guess the last thing I'll just mention, it's designed to be something that can accommodate the needs of the energy efficiency market, i.e. very quick response times, the ability to do relatively small loans, unsecured energy efficiency, consumer loans, and equipment secured loans on the commercial side.
Awesome. We have another question. When will we know how much specific states will receive? Wondering about New Hampshire.
I can't give you a number off the top of my head. We actually do know now what the states will be receiving through these revolving loan funds. I want to say New Hampshire is probably, because I don't believe it's one of the priority states, it's going to be something short of $1 million. So if that's leveraged by 5x, it's $4 to $5 million. It's not a huge number for the state of New Hampshire. There is guidance, and I'd be happy to follow up, and if you wanted to shoot along your specific email address, I'd be happy to get you that number. At least a good start at that number.
We have a question here. Will you have what paperwork will be required on your site? We will have links to that proper paperwork, but we are not going to be administering these. So, and I went through a lot of different programs, right? So whether it's the 179D commercial programs, whether it's the tax incentives, whether it's the rebates. So we will have as much as we can as far as links to that information, frankly, because there's going to be, in many cases, there could be 50 states with 50 different programs. I don't think that we're going to try to capture that, but we would be, especially if you're on the contracting side, we'd be more than happy to help you and talk to you about and then make sure that we can work with you individually, depending on where you are in your own state. Thank you. Will there be a web with a residential focus?
Will there be a web with a
web with a residential focus?
Maybe it's, I'm honestly not sure what the question is.
Yes,
maybe
Roger,
website. Yeah.
I'm not webinar.
A webinar. I think as these programs roll out and become much more focused, or excuse me, much more concrete, I think we'll be able to have another webinar that will talk about even more specifics. Keep in mind, frankly, probably 60-70% of what I showed you was residential right there.
Yeah. And then, is there any thought on increasing funding amounts? The amount falls short for any geothermal projects. These are set in federal law, so I think the answer is really no. I agree. These numbers are much more focused on end use, energy efficiency types of measures. They probably wouldn't be sufficient in and of themselves for geothermal. I get that, but that's what the federal government decided to do. Awesome. All right. Any more questions? We'll give it another minute. And again, if anybody else has any questions that they don't feel comfortable putting in the chat, feel free to reach out to your account manager. All right, Matthew, I think we can end it for today. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for facilitating, Jen, and thank you all for participating.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you, Karen. All right, everyone have a wonderful day. Enjoy your weekends. Bye-bye.
Thank you.